Sorry about that. Had to take a phone call. I'm back. So Bentham really believed that you could mathematically analyze, according to like 7 principles, exactly what you should do, what's the right thing to do in any circumstance. And I mean, you do your best guess up front. First, you guess the math, and then once the action's carried out, you evaluate what you've done. Did you do the right thing? And you know whether you did the right thing or not because you can do the math, and the math tells you. You created more pleasure than pain. And let me reiterate, more pleasure than pain means happiness. Less pleasure than pain, unhappiness. Going back to what I was saying the other night about misery, that you have to understand the level of misery. They're talking about if you can alleviate the suffering of someone, if you can give them a day where they feel like for a moment I had more pleasure than I had pain, then that's a happy moment. And that's your goal, to create those moments where people have more happiness, more pleasure, more joy in their life than misery and suffering and sorrow. That's your goal. That's moral behavior. And so when the math says you've done it, you've done it. Now, the great challenge that Bentham had to face was he was told, well, Jerry Bentham, you're telling me that pushpin is as good as poetry, maybe even better than poetry. Well, what does that mean? Well, pushpin was a kind of stupid little kid's game, a lot like it's a ball on a stick, and you try to knock over pins on a tabletop with the ball on the stick. And you go, that's just as good as poetry. Well, Bentham would say, yeah, the pleasure created was just as, maybe greater than you got out of poetry. I mean, most people don't like poetry, or don't enjoy the poetry of the sort that people want you to enjoy. I can't tell you for sure what's going on, but the fact is, he says, look, pleasure is pleasure is pleasure. Now, this bothered a lot of people. The other problem was this. You only knew for sure you'd done the right thing after the fact. Now, this didn't bother Bentham, but it bothered a lot of people out there in the world who wanted to know before. So Mill sets out to clean up Bentham's position. And he says, okay, we're going to still say the pleasure is the good. And we're still going to say that making people have more pleasure than pain is making them happy. And that's the goal of all good action, moral action. But we're going to say 2 things. One, we're going to say that these moral actions come in at least 2 kinds, because pleasure comes in at least 2 kinds. There's the kind of pleasure that anything that feels pleasure can feel. You know, you eat a good meal, that's pleasure. You have a good cold drink after you've been hot, that's pleasure. You get to rest after a hard workout, that's pleasure. All these kinds of pleasures, however, are pleasures that anything that can feel pleasure feels. So I don't know how far down the great chain of being, or the what shall we say, the neurological complexity circuit you want to look at. But at some point, it's certainly clear that human beings aren't the only thing that feel pleasure. Certainly, cats, dogs, pigs, elephants, cockroaches, for all I know. But the important point here is if you can feel pleasure, then your pleasure counts, and therefore you can be happy. And if you can be happy, then happiness is what people ought to create for you and you for them. Likewise, pain. Pain is to be avoided. Try to eliminate pain. Get pain out of the world. Nobody should feel any more pain than they have to, because pain is the heart of evil. It's not just the root or the result of evil. It is, in fact, what evil is. It's identical to being evil. More pain than pleasure. Evil. Wrong. Don't do it. Now, let's do a little sidebar here. When we're talking about all this pain and pleasure, we're not talking about your unique pains and pleasures. No. We're talking about the overall pains and pleasures in the world. Thus, if something causes me a great deal of pain and yet causes the whole rest of the world a great deal of pleasure, that's all that matters. Is that in total, there's more pleasure in the world than pain in the world. I mean, that's hard to calculate sometimes, but other times it's not. It's pretty straightforward. And that's the point. So that it's not about me looking out for myself, being egotistical or self-interested. It's about creating the most pleasure and the most pain in the world. And the most pleasure is a good thing. The least pain is a good thing. Lower pain, greater pain, increased pain, that's a bad thing. Decreasing pleasure, that's a bad thing. We want to have more pleasure, less pain in the world. And yes, Mill would have argued for vegetarianism, did. He certainly argued for the humane treatment of animals, helped found the Royal Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals, or whatever that thing is, the RSPCA, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. There we go, not the protection of cruelty to animals. Keep bearing this in mind, that everything counts and everyone counts and all levels count. It's not about seeking self-pleasure, it's about causing the most pleasure possible in the world. Now, for those people who are kind of offended by all this concept, bear in mind, as Bentham said, well, what else is the sacrifice of Jesus Christ? That one person suffers so that a great deal of people don't have to. That's the heart of being utilitarian. Just a little thought there. All right, so the utilitarian position is eliminate pain, promote pleasure. Everybody's pleasure counts, everybody's pain counts. So whenever you act, you not only think about what pleasure and pain is doing for you, you have to think about everybody who's being touched by your actions as well. And as I say, this results in, one, it being hard to calculate, and two, you can only calculate it after the fact. Now, Mill set out this idea that there's two kinds of pleasure possible, what all things can feel, and there are some kinds of pleasures that only human beings can feel. And those pleasures are higher and better and should be pursued more because we're human beings. Thus, he says, it is better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. The exercises, the mental exercises, the truly human exercises that might leave Socrates dissatisfied, but nevertheless has presented him with a greater view of his humanity, is a much better thing than being a pig satisfied. You know, his argument here is because the pleasure that is human is far greater than the pleasure that is not human. I'm inclined to like Mill's position on this, but you know, I don't see that it necessarily follows. And his other modification of material of utilitarianism, I don't care for at all, and I'll tell you why. I mean, but let's go back. We were trying to say, could we know before? And Mill says, well, okay, what we'll do is we'll have rules, and we'll follow the rules, and the rules will come because the rules are the kinds of things that in general cause more pleasure than pain. Thus, we tell the truth because most of the time telling the truth causes more pleasure than pain, as opposed to Kant, who tells the truth because it's the only logically consistent way to behave, as opposed to Confucius, who has you telling the truth because it's creating the superior man or woman within you. Okay, you see the reasons we all do these things, but what's problematic about Mill's attempt to save the day by giving people rules that they can follow and know in advance that they're doing the right thing is ultimately the rightness of the rules falls back on the fact that actions following those rules bring about pleasure and pain. Well, what about actions following the rule that bring about more pain than pleasure? Well, then, see, then the rule isn't justified. So, as a general rule, philosophers reject rule utilitarianism. That's the idea that you follow a rule that's supposed to bring about more pleasure than pain, and prefer act utilitarianism, where admittedly you don't know in advance you're doing the right thing, but in the end, the evaluation you have is honest to your central principle that pleasure promotes. The pleasure is what happiness is, and therefore pleasure good, pain bad, promoting pleasure, good thing, promoting something else, bad thing. So that's the sort of thing I want you to keep in mind. Now, I've just pointed out a way in which you could see utilitarianism and Kantianism and the moral, the virtue theories, looking at things the same way. This concept of lying. Most of the time, I can imagine, well, for example, arranging this class together, telling the truth, a better thing than lying about it. And so we're all approved to do this. I mean, we could have just done it on our own and just lied to the school, but no, this way we're working and it's honest and it's better for all of us and it promotes pleasure and it's key to telling the truth. But they don't always agree. Now, what we have to do is imagine this condition, this circumstance. I mean, there's lots of kinds of circumstances, but this is one I've been working with for years, so I'm going to tell it to you. Okay, we're on a roof. Well, I'm on a roof. I'm sitting on this roof, and during a flood, there's a terrible flood. The water's just rushing past me out to the ocean, and people are all going to be drowned and killed, and I've got a rope, and I can throw it to one person at a time. And I've already thrown it to a few people and go by one at a time. All of a sudden, two people are coming by at the same time. One of these people is my child, and another is someone else's child. Now, my child is a shit. A totally irredeemable, no good, layabout, causes trouble, the whole problem of the neighborhood. Dumb as a stump and mean as can be. That's my kid. Now the other kid is the angel of the neighborhood. Everyone loves this child. The child is musical, the child is friendly, the child is brilliant. Can be anything good in the world that it wants to be, because this is simply a good child, a good person. All right, well, let's take a look. What's going to happen here? According to the virtue theorist, I'm going to save my child, because being a good parent is a goal for being a virtuous person. So I should save my child. Now, Kant is going to say, I don't care who you save, as long as you save somebody. See, for Kant, remember, everyone gets treated the same way. Everyone has dignity. Everyone is an end in themselves. So there's not any reason to choose between saving my child and the other child. But I must save whoever I can't save. So again, it would be wrong to try to save both if one is all I can save. If all I can successfully save is one, then one is all I should try to save. Now, the utilitarian is going to say, forget my child, save the other child, because the other child is going to bring more happiness into the world than my child. At least, given all the evidence we have to hand. We wouldn't know till after the fact. And see, that's the thing. It's always a problem. It's always a worry. What if I made the wrong choice? Well, we do make the wrong choice sometimes, and that's one of the things to keep in mind. Ethics is not about being right all the time. Most of us are not moral all the time. Most of us are evil from time to time, according to whichever moral principle we want to take a look at. We do bad things. We're not trying to set up a moral theory that makes it possible for you to be perfect. We're trying to set up a moral theory that accurately evaluates whether or not any given action is good or bad. And if the principle doesn't enable us to judge actions as good and bad, or people, as the case may be, then it's no good. It's a bad moral theory. Kant provides us with that. Aristotle provides us with that. Confucius provides us with that. And so too does Mill. Each of them will make us uncomfortable from time to time. Remember that Kant had us telling the truth to the would-be murderer. Mill has us drowning our own child. The virtue theorists may call for us ultimately to divorce ourselves from the world, our family, and our friends in order to become more distant, more taken out of the world of appetite and temptation. So each of these theories has unattractive components as well as attractive components. But the point, as I see it, is that they're consistent theories. that as long as you follow them, then you can feel good about yourself. I think that's really important. I mean, this is one of those things where, I think we're on to something here. Just as I thought we were on to something every now and then back in the metaphysics and maybe a little more in the epistemology, but here's the heart of here's something that's really important. It's not so much what your moral theory is, but that you behave according to your moral theory. I once had a friend who'd, after a car accident, had become a very devout Catholic, and she said to me one time, she says, "Anthony, wouldn't it be a more wonderful world if everybody really and truly believed in the teachings of Jesus Christ?" And I said, "Well, I think you're probably right about that, but wouldn't the world be a more wonderful place if everybody really and truly believed in the teachings of the Buddha, or Confucius, or Aristotle? One constant worldview, everybody pursuing it the same way, then yeah, everybody's going to be happier. It's going to be a better world because the standard that everyone has applies the same way. We only got one standard. But human beings aren't like that. Human beings have more than one standard. And while they all often lead to the same conclusions, they don't have to. But what should be the case is that when I come to you and I know what you stand for, what your moral principle is, then I can say this is a good person when they behave this way, because this is what their moral principle says. So when I come to you, I can consistently count on you as a moral person to do a very particular thing or another. Utilitarianism, looking at outcomes, looking at pleasure, getting away from pain, promoting happiness, eliminating misery. It's all empirical, it's all testable, it's all quantifiable. This then is a moral theory which you can work with. Now, as I say, I embrace Mill's distinction between the human and the animal, although again, rule utilitarianism is inconsistent. But I think you've got in utilitarianism, as in Kantianism, as in Confucianism, as in Aristotelianism, you've got a good, consistent moral theory that, if followed coherently, followed faithfully, will enable you to say of yourself you're a good person. And that's what ethics is all about.